All right, let's just dive right into this explainer and uncover the psychological mechanics behind a very specific, almost universal phenomenon. Why we, as parents, sometimes react so intensely to our kids' everyday behaviors. I mean, we've literally all been there, right? A totally seemingly minor disagreement over, say, putting on shoes suddenly escalates into this massive, disproportionate argument. So today we're going to unpack exactly why those common behaviors act as such powerful triggers, lighting up our internal wiring in ways we might not even realize.
So, you might be wondering, why do we forget literally every parenting tip the exact second our child starts screaming? Well, what's really interesting about this question is that it highlights something called the knowing-doing gap. If you're a parent, you probably already know what you're supposed to do. You've read the books, you follow the accounts online, but under stress, that knowledge just completely collapses. And that's because you don't just forget the technique, an underlying psychological framework, kind of like a hidden emotional blueprint called a schema, takes over entirely.
To make sense of all this, we're going to map out a clear path today. We'll run through 1. The knowing-doing gap. 2. The schema amplifier. 3. The mirror effect. 4. The anatomy of a cascade. And finally, 5. The power of repair.
Okay, Section 1. The knowing-doing gap. The space between knowing and doing. Let's start by validating a completely universal struggle. You likely already know what you should do, but in the heat of the moment, that knowledge simply evaporates. And this illustrates our main focus today perfectly. You see, traditional parenting coaching usually asks, hey, what technique should this parent use to stop a tantrum? But schema coaching peers inward. It asks, wait, what unmet need is actually being touched in the parent? So we aren't looking at generic tips today. We're looking at what a child's behavior activates inside you and which of your own historical unmet needs is suddenly, driving the bus.
So here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. You are not a damaging parent. Seriously, you are simply an activated parent. When you shout or withdraw or micromanage, you're usually just attempting to manage an overwhelming internal state, things like fear, shame, or just pure helplessness. Framing it this way really removes the guilt and lets us look objectively at what's actually happening in your brain. Moving right along to Section 2. The schema amplifier. Why parenting triggers us so reliably. Let's explore why the kitchen at 7:40 a.m. can feel like an emotional minefield, even if you are totally calm and collected at work.
So, why the amplification? Well, parenting is a massive schema amplifier for a few compounding reasons. Think about it. Children are completely emotionally dependent on you. They're emotionally dysregulated a lot of the time, they constantly push against boundaries, and eventually they separate from you. Combine all of those daily triggers with the fact that you're likely operating under a chronic load of stress and sleep loss, and it is literally a perfect storm. These behaviors aren't just annoyances, they are direct hits to your deepest psychological vulnerabilities.
All right, Section 3, the mirror effect, unconsciously giving what we got. Let's get to the psychological core of this explainer and see how a child's behavior acts as this powerful, really unavoidable mirror. This brings us to the idea of the double mirror. When your child has a need, it forces this subconscious question to the surface. What did I need as a child that I did not sufficiently receive, and where does that affect what I can give my child now? We really have to recognize when our kids' needs unconsciously evoke our own painful memories of what we never got, or maybe even what we were punished for needing. Let's make this concrete and see how it plays out with specific needs, starting with cluster A, connection and acceptance. For example, if a child needs comfort, but the parent has an emotional deprivation schema from their own childhood, that parent might internally just freeze. They might secretly resent the child's neediness, or on the flip side, oversoothe the child because they literally do not know what healthy, bounded comfort looks like. The parent's unmet need completely interferes with the child's current need. Or look at cluster E, spontaneity, joy, and play. If a child needs to be silly and playful, a parent with an unrelenting standard schema might find that their joy just quickly disappears. Why? Because to them, play feels self-indulgent. Their internal schema is telling them there's always something more important or productive to be doing, so they completely miss the child's need for just non-performance-based connection.
Now for Section 4, anatomy of a cascade, the microseconds of a trigger. Let's break down exactly how these triggers unfold in the brain during a conflict.
It happens in like milliseconds. Let's see how this cascade builds step by step. Step 1, the trigger. A child simply says, "No, I'm not doing it." Boom.
Step 2, the parent's schema instantly assigns meaning. I am powerless, or I'm failing. Step 3, this plunges the parent into feeling like a vulnerable, helpless, humiliated child themselves. And finally, step 4, to cope with that terrible feeling, they snap into punitive parent mode, attacking, shaming, or threatening. Mapping out a shout like this definitely doesn't excuse the behavior, but it absolutely makes it interruptible. It shows you exactly how a simple no transforms into a full-blown internal crisis.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the power of repair, restoring connection after rupture. Since we know these cascades will happen, because, hey, we're human, our ultimate goal isn't perfect parenting, it's repairable parenting.
Clean repair is true leadership. It requires taking total ownership without adding a single excuse. Saying something like, "I'm sorry, but you made me shout," is just a counterattack dressed up in an apology costume. You must recognize their emotion, offer reassurance, and, this is crucial, keep the original limit in place. Repairing without holding the limit just teaches the child that guilt cancels boundaries. There is a massive difference between reacting and leading here. When faced with defiance, a schema-driven response is often a punitive attack, like, "Don't you dare speak to me like that." But by tapping into what we call the benevolent adult part of ourselves, we can hit pause. The benevolent response is to validate the child's anger, hold the limit firmly but without humiliation, and guarantee a return to connection. You effectively step right out of the cascade.
This whole beautiful concept of repair is anchored deeply in some inspiring work by Dr. Ed Tronick and Dr. Claudia Gold from their book, The Power of Discord. They radically reframe this cultural myth we have that good, healthy relationships are supposed to be perfectly smooth and completely conflict-free.
I really want to leave you with this thought from them. It is the imperfections of connection that make relationships work. Discord and repair are the engines of development. The absolute messiness of mismatch and reconnection is actually what builds trust. So, knowing that, how will you use your next inevitable parenting trigger as a genuine opportunity for growth, rather than just another reason for guilt? Think about that the next time you feel that familiar schema start to take over.